everybody, this is Praxis, and in this video I want to convey to you what's really going on in my head right now.
Has there ever been a more scary start to a video than that? I don't know. Meow! Huples cat. I'm doing part 2. Praxis did a really good video where he talked about the two main threats he feels are coming very soon that he's preparing for, and I responded to the first one, which was in fact economic failure of the United States in specific terms. But he also mentioned something else. What else did Praxis Prepper worry about happening this year or next?
That you could lose your home. If that does happen, and hopefully that doesn't happen, but if it does happen, if you have a plan for it, you're going to be a heck of a lot better off than if that happens and you don't have any plan, if you didn't lay any groundwork whatsoever.
Yeah, in most SHTF scenarios, actually losing your home is really likely, and it doesn't have to be a global catastrophe. It can be a local SHTF where you lose your job or your income, or there's a local gas explosion or whatever. So he's quite right. One of the things we should be focusing on is what are you going to do to stop yourself losing your home in various SHTF events.
Start thinking of a plan now. It would have been great if you had done this a couple of years ago, but you know, if you haven't, you didn't, and this is where you are right now. Start thinking now is better than not thinking about it at all. Have a plan if the monetary system changes and you're not one of the lucky few that, you know, get thrown into whatever this future is going to be in a positive place. That could happen. Get ready for that.
Sound advice, and I quite agree with him. It doesn't really matter whether you start today or you start tomorrow or you started 15 years ago in terms of prepping. What prepping will do, it'll give you a mindset where you can actually cope with minor, then moderate, then maybe major challenges. Bearing in mind we all will need a lot of luck in an absolute major catastrophe.
The other big thing that I always mention when I'm interviewed that I think is a real wild card and could be a real curveball for a lot of people, I'll try to throw some more metaphors into that as well.
How dare you!
For me, what's coming up is déjà vu all over again.
Our environmental changes, climatic changes.
For me, one of the major things I actually am prepping for is human-caused climate change, really badly affecting both the supply of food and water, and also economic and military instability that will result from that. I think it's really interesting that Praxis here spends most of the beginning half of his video mentioning it in terms of he's looking for the right words, because as soon as you say humans cause climate change can end us all, a lot of people out there actually turn their brains off.
How dare you!
Now, whether you agree with what I just said or not is somewhat irrelevant. You should still be interested in not the message, if you're not interested in the message, but you should be interested in the prepping in that type of a scenario, because let's face it, it could be a nuclear war, it could be an asteroid strike, it could be a dam breaks, it could be that you're forced to leave your home and move to a different climate area, it could be wildfires, it could be a whole bunch of things. But the climate is always changing. Local weather is not climate, but globally the planet is heating up really rapidly. Interesting enough, for some strange reason, the heating is actually happening as carbon dioxide is released from burning fossil fuels and chopping trees down, which is often a type of an effect because it's also removing carbon sinks. So we're increasingly seeing carbon dioxide entering the oceans and acidifying them and killing some of the life there. We're seeing trees being removed that actually produce oxygen and remove carbon dioxide and also liberate carbon dioxide when they're burned and chopped. And we're seeing all of these factors, and we're seeing almost 8 billion people, and we're all seeing this huge growth, a huge growth in consumerism across the planet and meat eating across the planet. And as carbon dioxide atmospheric levels rise, the temperature, both land and ocean, rises.
I know that that is offensive to some people. That's fine. If you don't want to listen to the rest of this video and you don't want to prepare for any of that because you just don't want to think that that could ever happen.
But if you say humans cause climate change, a certain very vocal minority of preppers and other people get very, very angry. So you understand why he's going environmental But honestly, none of us should be afraid at all to speak loudly about the things we're actually prepping for. It's very disingenuous, and I'm not accusing Praxis of being disingenuous here at all. He's often referred to human-caused climate change. He's just trying to be sensitive because he knows it's just going to trigger a whole bunch of people for no good reason. And there is no good reason to be triggered by that statement, because if you disagree that humans cause climate change, or you disagree that humans have a major effect on climate change, or if you don't believe climate change is happening, so what? What's your big problem with these types of video? Do you own Exxon? If you do, I could see you getting really angry. But if you don't, chill out, relax. Seriously. Nothing threatens your lifestyle as much as environmental destruction. That always threatens people's lifestyle.
I honestly don't have a problem with that. If you don't want to look at that as being a possibility, if you want to fixate mostly on, aliens invading by airdropping bird flu infected clown zombies or, whatever else, and those things seem plausible, but the idea that, the climate could be changing or that people are changing the climate, if that is so offensive to you, you just don't want to listen to anything else that I say, that is totally fine, because I wouldn't mind living in a world where all the people that are that closed-minded, because maybe it's wrong, maybe I'm wrong and scientists are wrong and maybe that's not happening, but to be so closed-minded as to not even listen to the evidence, I honestly don't mind living in a world in the future where people like that have self-selected to go extinct. That is not offensive to me. Please feel free to not prepare for that if you find that idea so offensive that you just would not want to exist in a world that, where that would be a real thing.
I actually find it pretty offensive that people don't believe COVID is a pandemic and that human-caused climate change is real. I find it offensive to my notion that my fellow human beings en masse are able to think and look not just at the now and the past, but also look into the future and prepare a world that will be better than this one. And I find it offensive that some people won't actually embrace what I see as truth. But I think we all have to be very careful about getting offended.
You have stolen my dreams and my childhood with your empty words.
Rather than get offended, I think it's time we just listen to each other and figure it out. For example, a whole bunch of my subs really don't believe in human-caused climate change. That's fine. So are you actually doing any preps for climate change in your local area? Are you not making any preps at all? Are you not storing water or food because you know that the food and water will continue in that area? Are you prepping for something else like civil war or nuclear war? In which case you still have to do pretty much the same preps as those of us prepping for human-caused climate change, right? Pretty much the same. And let's all mention, I'm going to mention it now, green energy. Green energy, if you haven't got green energy and you're a prepper, you're totally out of your head. If all you have to do to produce energy in grid down is a gasoline-fired generator or a diesel-fired generator, you have no solar at all because you don't believe in green energy and you don't believe in sustainability, you really got to look at how hardened and how long-term your preps are. And I doubt there's very many preppers out there who absolutely don't believe in human-caused climate change, do not in fact have solar lights at least, and maybe a couple of panels. I'm fairly sure you do, and for good reasons. We're not doing this because I think you're guilty for destroying the planet. I am 56. I have really guzzled a huge amount of fossil fuels, and I still am. It's not about me judging you as lacking. What it's about is looking at data, and it's not fixed, really, and seeing that the trends in carbon dioxide, the trends in global heating, and the trends in ice fall and snowfall and rainfall, and where the jet streams are and how the jet streams are moving and how hot the Arctic is becoming now in the summer. It doesn't take much to realise that oceans will continue to rise and expand by heat, and that fish and other life in the oceans will become increasingly pressured, and that land is going to experience more and more droughts and more massive flooding.
We are in the beginning of a mass extinction.
It doesn't take you to accept human-caused climate change to see the factors that are occurring because of human-caused climate change that are actually going on. It doesn't take much, but to be offended, to be triggered. There's more going on here than the actual argument about who causes the climate change. It's not a political argument, because that actually justifies it in saying there's actually two obvious camps. There isn't. There's human-caused climate change and there's people that don't accept it. They don't have any evidence. Human-caused climate change has all the evidence. So there is something else going on, and that's way beyond this video.
Get ready for that, because we as human beings are so reliant on the planet with the climate system that it has had for the last several hundred years. When there have been snaps and changes in the climate, even minor, I don't know whether to say mild or minor, it both means the same thing though. Even when they've been small changes, it has had huge impacts on societies. Empires have risen and collapsed based on climactic changes. And climactic changes in the past have happened, through natural cycles. They happen repeatedly. The one that we're in right now, it honestly doesn't matter whether it's human-caused or natural. You might say, well, if we know that it's human-caused and we could do something to change it, I do not see people rising to that challenge.
Eek! After spending quite a few minutes dancing around environmental, Praxis kind of unloads a bit there. That, I think, is full-on rant mode from Praxis Prepper. And I think he's wrong. I do think he's absolutely wrong on that. I don't want people who don't accept my view of science or scientists' view of science to go extinct. I'm not really happy that they will, because they'll take us all down with them. Make no mistake here, when the taps no longer produce water every day and it's only once or twice a week, when the taps stop producing water, when the stores stop having anything based with wheat or corn or rice in the stores, and there's no fish to be had for love nor money because all the lakes are too hot for fish to actually breed, at that point there'll be very few climate change deniers out there. And yeah, extinction is a huge possibility, but it won't be just them or us. That's one of the fallacies people bring up. Actually, it doesn't matter whether people accept human-caused climate change or not. Most people who have looked at this are actually believing that from the 80s or the 90s onwards, it's irreversible. The heating effect that's going to happen to push the temperature quite quickly beyond levels that human current society can survive at is going to happen whether we absolutely all go full Greta Thunberg right now.
People are suffering. People are dying. Entire ecosystems are collapsing. We are in the beginning of a mass extinction, and all you can talk about is money and fairy tales of eternal economic growth. How dare you?
Or not, it doesn't matter. The extinction of most of us is baked in.
I don't know if you do. I certainly have tried to reduce my footprint on this planet as much as I've been able to. I feel like I've done a pretty good job. I don't see a lot of other people out there like me, and I'm not going to whine and kick and scream, insisting that everyone has to be like me.
Now, whilst Praxis claims that he hasn't done much to harm the planet and he's doing really well, what he's doing is a sustainable life, and he's probably got a much lower footprint than quite a few people because he's using solar power, he's doing a few other things, and he's growing some of his food, though not all of it, and he probably has a car, and he probably has a car that runs off gasoline. What he has, and this is what the problem is, and this is going to offend everybody pretty much, he has a child, at least one child, maybe two childs. I don't know if he has two children, I don't know if it's Amber's relationship, I think she's his daughter. Anyway, that aside, he has at least one child. So by reproducing ourselves in rich cultures, even if we use our recycle bins and put some solar panels in at $20,000 on our house, we are still sucking a huge amount of fossil fuels out of the ground and burning them. Whether we admit it or not, we are.
The way that it has usually been throughout history, and this is another one of those let's get back to normal kind of things, the way that it has usually been normally through history is that people have had an impact on their environment, whether it was deforesting, like the Mayan, was it the Mayans or the Aztecs? I don't personally remember, but there was a Central American indigenous peoples nation, and they wanted a lot of plaster for all their pyramids. Again, I can't remember whether it was the Mayans or the Aztecs. For our practical purposes, it doesn't really matter. But it took a lot of raw energy to fire all of their lime, to make their lime plasters and everything. They deforested their entire area, and once they destroyed their environment, their civilization collapsed. It crumbled.
Around about 900 AD, the Mayan civilization of Mesoamerica, pre-contact with Europe, America, had done very, very well, but they were brought down not just by overuse of plaster in their temples and their homes, but by an abundant population and lack of ability within that population to keep growing. So they started fighting everybody around them, and initially that was very good. Like the Romans, you fight everybody around you, you're aggressive, you're well organized, you have a superior technology, you beat everybody, you conquer them, you enslave them, you take their stuff, and you grow and you grow and grow. At a certain point the technology hits a hard wall where you can no longer expand, and all you can do is kind of wobble at the edges and try and hold. At that point things are going to decay. And they do. And when it decayed, for the Mayans, it decayed extremely rapidly. But they weren't the only people that we know of to fall victim to climate change in human history. Around 4,000 years ago in Mesopotamia, principally in the Iraq-Syrian area, the Akkadian Empire collapsed, and one of the reasons it collapsed, in fact the main reason, was the area, because of climate change naturally occurring, experienced about a 300-year drought. I think if California is going to experience a 300-year drought, things in 300 years' time will be substantially different, not just in California, but also in the United States. Between 800 and 1420 AD, the Khmer Empire actually expanded and was doing very, very well. And they were also brought down by droughts due to overpopulation of deforestation. But they were also brought down because the droughts were there, but every time the rain came, the monsoons were so aggressive and so violent. And so all we have now is a few temples hacked out of the jungle. But their civilization was pretty impressive if you look at it. We come from the land of the ice and snow, from the midnight sun where the hot springs flow. Valhalla, I am coming. You may or may not recognise that song, but Greenland was called Greenland because the Vikings settled it. There was only about 5,000 settlers and they mostly lived on the coast. They settled it for about 500 years and they had a great colony. They were doing very well. They never integrated with the indigenous people there, which was a mistake, because when they stopped getting resupplied from Norway and Sweden and Denmark, and climate changed dramatically, they ended up going extinct. That European colony in Greenland went extinct, and in fact we now believe there wasn't civilizations but there were colonies of Vikings in North America, principally in Canada and the east coast of the United States. So the question is the American Empire about to be brought down by climate change and overpopulation? Yeah, maybe, I don't know. I think climate change is baked in, and I think we're going to see substantial changes in our way of life and our ability to use things in the next 5 years based on human-caused climate change. Could be wrong, hope I am.
Well, that is what is normal to be humans, is to spread and destroy your environment, have it collapse, and have your numbers suffer for it.
Not a very optimistic message there, Praxis. The entirety of American culture actually is based upon the myth of progress, right? Occasional plateaus, occasional slight reversals, lots of trouble, but progress, human progress. We will always inevitably progress. If you look at history, Praxis is wrong. We've actually progressed hugely over a time period. There's been large periods of suffering, most of what I would argue is unnecessary suffering because of stupidity or by violence or war, which is very stupid. So over time we've progressed, we've done very well. So we put men on the moon, and we did, because we've put satellites up there in different countries who don't even like America, have put satellites up there and have shown pictures of what was left of the landers and even footprints of the Apollo astronauts on the moon. But again, some people will get offended by that because they know better than reality.
I like to think that we're not doomed to always be like that. I like to think that we can improve and evolve and develop over time. I like to believe that that's true. I have like almost a religious belief in that, not based on evidence, but just because I want to believe that, and it really doesn't matter whether I believe it or not. It makes me happier to believe that we have a positive direction. But history has suggested that if we have any kind of a positive direction going in that, going towards that, we're not moving very fast in that direction, and we're probably not going to make it this time either.
So I love this little montage of disasters he put up, and I did take some notes about what I was looking at whilst he was talking. This is what he actually covered in order of disaster. Wildfire virus, riots. Riots are a symptom of climate change or economic destruction. Wildfires again, because let's face it, wildfires are pretty dramatic on the old visual apparatus. Tornado, a flood, hurricane, another wildfire, another flood, an asteroid strike. Asteroid strikes have got nothing to do with human economic activity or with human-caused climate change. However, it is interesting, if and when we ever actually do transcend our boundary of the Earth and actually have vibrant colonies in space, asteroid strikes may well be a weapon of war because it'd be quite cheap and really effective. Hurricane, again, wildfire, again, a tsunami, and to end it all, a solar flare, which I thought was kind of an interesting one. Because solar flare, again, also is not related to economic or human-caused climate change. So I think it's kind of interesting what he focused on. What did he miss, in my opinion, from that list? What he missed was the obvious one. Food and water shortages resulting in starvation and dehydration and death and collapse of society. This is not unusual. We have seen this over and over. When I was a little lad, TV crews in England would often try and raise money to try and feed the starving of Africa because of climate change in their area, but mostly because of violence, because of war, and because of overbreeding and other issues that happened. So one of the major effects we will see if human-caused climate change becomes really bad is famine in areas that we haven't really seen them. It wouldn't really shock people to know right now around the world there's a lot of people going to bed hungry and people are actually starving to death, mostly in the continent of Africa. Asia's done really well over the last few decades, and they don't have as many people dying of famine over there as they used to, but certainly we know about North Korea, and of course you can say, well, it's because they're socialists, so it won't happen to me. We could easily see a scenario with aquifers running dry and prolonged droughts in certain parts of the United States and Canada, where you might actually see famine on the streets of America. There is already poverty and starvation. That's economically caused. We could easily feed everybody on the planet right now. We're just choosing not to because of money. But with human-caused climate change, the major factor we're going to see is definitely starvation, which is why a lot of us are preaching storing food and growing food. And growing food thinking about your local water, wind and climate, and how it might change over the next few years because of human-caused climate change. Prep for the stuff that's likely that everybody says is probably happening, especially when you don't believe it. Toodles. This has been a 2021 Arctic Terrier production.